make a play. Like, I get the sense that everybody's just kind of looking around, just assuming everything's going to be okay. Somebody else is going to make a play. We need somebody to make a play. And I told them that, like, the guy on our sideline that to me had the most energy in the first half was DQ Smith, and he was suspended. So I said, he's got the most energy out there. And some of you guys are not, that aren't playing in the game or are playing in the game. We just don't look like us. And I said, I know how DQ is going to play in the second half because he's so excited to get back out there, and he did. And we need to make sure we all are as well. And those guys did it.
All right. Welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I'm Caleb, joined by Pauline, because Alan is in Paris right now. So you'll, if you're on GamecockScoop.com, you will hear from him all afternoon as South Carolina ladies take on Notre Dame at 1 p.m. Eastern. And he'll have some live coverage from there. He's also had several exclusive quotes and articles on GamecockScoop.com over the weekend that you only get if you're there in person, which he is. So go check those out. He had a really cool story this morning from several alumni as well, talking about the team and the program and its trajectory. So lots of good stuff if you're into the women's side of things. So right there at the top, you were hearing from Coach Beamer following the Jacksonville State game. Obviously, South Carolina won 38-28, but I assume most of you know at this point that the score was much closer than the 10 points at the end. Jacksonville State was driving with the ball with, 2 or 3 minutes left and a chance to take the lead. Or at least tie it up and send it to overtime or whatever. Stone Blanton intercepts the ball for 88-yard pick six that ultimately sealed the game away. But really, it was in doubt all before that. Before we get too far into that, I did want to give you a couple of recruiting notes. The big news from the weekend was that South Carolina had 3 5-stars on campus. So first, they had Dylan Stewart, who is obviously their 2024 Edge commitment. We can talk more about that a little bit later on whether or not that was like a good game for him to witness, because the crowd kind of filtered out. South Carolina obviously didn't play their best throughout the game, all those sorts of things, but maybe hopefully he's viewing that as an opportunity for him to immediately contribute. And then you had 2025 offensive lineman David Sanders, who is the number 1 overall at the position. I believe he's the number 2 overall player in the Rivals 2025 class right now, also a 5-star. As far as I've heard, that was a good weekend for him. He's been here a couple of times before, but this was the first visit since April, I believe, when he came for spring practice. Yeah, I mean, we'll see how that all plays out. He stayed more than just for the game. Also, he's not very far away. He's out of Charlotte, so easy trip down. And then the other note is 2025 basketball forward, who is a 5-star, Jameer Jones, was also on campus this weekend visiting with Coach Paris, and he went to the football game as well. So we'll see how it all plays out, but some big time names in the building over the weekend. And then I guess the question is, did the game result help at all? So Pauline, you were there in the press box. Pauline and Peyton filled in for Alan during the live thread and getting all the game stuff done after on Saturday. Yeah, what were your initial impressions, I guess, from the game, from the crowd? I believe you sent me a picture of the student section being fully cleared out by like halftime or so. What were some of your takeaways?
So first off, I made the joke that our student section was thinner than our D line tonight or this past game. And, I think most Gamecock fans expected us to be much more in control of the game than we were. And I'm really, after the first play of the second half, that was, I think, when most students were like, well, it's what it is. I'm going home. The Jacksonville State student section was what it looked like, how our student section should look. We were playing at a Jacksonville State level. Like, it should have been opposite. I would assume that Jacksonville State was South Carolina in that game because of just how they played. We played I think it was the worst, messiest game I think I've working. So
yeah, it was definitely a weird start to the game. So let's just like look at some of the weirdness that ensued. There were 33 total drives between the teams in the game, and that just tells you how quick it was going. So by the end of the first quarter, Jacksonville State had already run 4 drives and scored a touchdown, and South Carolina had already run 4 drives and scored 2 touchdowns. And it all just was very chaotic. So for the most part, it felt like there was 3 and outs, 4 and outs, whatever happening on each side, or a long touchdown drive, and there was pretty much nothing in between. And it really, to me, felt like the East Carolina, I mean, obviously a little bit more high scoring, but the East Carolina game from year 1 of the Beamer era. And I think maybe that's the thing that frustrated South Carolina fans, is why you were in a dogfight against a team that just moved up from FCS this past off season. Why you're in a dogfight with them to the very end, to the point that you could have definitely lost that game. I mean, they were driving to win it in the fourth quarter.
Being tied up with 2 minutes essentially, I could tell that the energy, I mean, everybody could tell the energy on the field was, I would say, at best deflated. Like, we'll have like hangover games where we'll get ourselves together by the second half. And we had a hangover game until basically halfway through the fourth quarter, I would say personally.
Yeah, there were some bright spots. I mean, if you're Xavier Legette, obviously you played a great game throughout. He actually ended up having the number 2 overall single game receiving yards in school history behind Pharaoh Cooper's. He almost got it. He was 16 yards. He actually dropped a pass, I think, that would have put him over the edge in the fourth quarter. But, just that close to it. I believe Peyton wrote a post-game story about Xavier Legette and how he's on pace for a record-breaking season. And obviously, like, that's like one of those stories you really want to elevate, because he's been here for 5 years. He was injured, battled back from injury, and has really worked hard and just done things the right way. And you've seen, him be rewarded for that. In today's college football environment, it's very rare that someone that doesn't immediately break out, but has that sort of talent, kind of sticks around in the program and eventually does break out. So that's been really cool to see. And he's a big part of why South Carolina won on Saturday. 2 touchdowns. Man, what was his final stat line? It was crazy. Let me pull that up real quick. He had 9 receptions for 217 yards and 2 touchdowns. And like I said, Pharaoh Cooper, I think, had like 234 yards or something to set the single game record. So he was right there. I think you also had something to say about Spencer Rattler and his performance.
So, I mean, it was nice to see, obviously Legette is not at 100% right now, but it was nice to see the dynamic duo back together. We didn't really have the rhythm that we should have had on the field, but seeing the deep balls being thrown again, seeing the being able to not run the ball is nice again, because for the past multiple games without Xavier, we haven't really had any options besides that. Even though Spencer is a mobile quarterback, it's nice to be able to have his arm being used,
Yeah, definitely. And really, the big plays are what made the difference in this game, right? So South Carolina's defense finally forced some turnovers. They had 2 fumbles and an interception. 2 of those 3 turnovers led directly to points. So the first one was the fumble right before halftime. South Carolina scored in 4 plays and 49 drives with 30 seconds left before half. And you kind of felt like, okay, South Carolina is settled in. They're going to come back out in the second half and start to pull away. And then, of course, you start the second half with an interception on the very first play. And the following 3 drives were punt, turnover on downs, punt, before you finally did hit that 65-yard pass to Legette for a touchdown to kind of swing the momentum back before the fourth quarter and get things back under control. But yeah, there was just no consistency, right? There are no drives, including There's only one drive over 5 plays, including touchdown drives, and that was a 10-play, 48-yard drive that ended in a field goal for South Carolina in the fourth quarter, which also was off of a fumble. So South Carolina scored 17 points off of turnovers from Jacksonville State, which ended up making a big difference there.
I think your point of chaos on the field, I was just seeing from above sky view, the ball was all over the field. It never was in a person's hand. Half the time it was, everybody was like, where is it? But yeah, no, messy.
We have a comment from Hip Hop Madness 803. He said, watched on TV. Actually didn't understand why the fans left. We needed the win. Our team is young. Shane needs time. Go Gamecocks. Yeah, I as we kind of take a bigger picture approach, I tend to agree with that. It's not time to bail yet. And yeah, I mean, technically you're still in bowl contention, although I don't think anyone reasonable at the moment would project that you're going to win the last 3 games. But yeah, I mean, you needed that one to kind of stay on track. Even if you don't make a bowl, I think you need to at least win 2 of these last 3 and try to keep some positive momentum going into the offseason. And that's what a lot of what I wrote about in the rapid reaction on Saturday was kind of like, what are the vibes? What's the vibe check right now? Because obviously there were several times throughout the game where, like you said, fans left. There was boos coming down from the stadium. One particular moment was in that second half when I talked about it going interception, punt, turnover on downs, punt. After the turnover on down, South Carolina had the ball again, got all the way to midfield, got up to the 47-yard line, and punted it away on 4th and short. And that was pretty much when the boos were the loudest. And yeah, what do you think it was? Is it just the frustration of coming off 4 straight losses, kind of feeling like in many ways this is a lost season, and then felt like you were slipping away to an inferior opponent?
Well, I've talked to the players before, and I mean, Lenoris, he's told me that, never say never, but it hasn't been deterring in the sense that they know they should be like playing better. I think they know this is where we stand for the season. There's no more maybe substitutions or any new like plays we can do because it just is what it is. But to Hip Hop Madness point, we are really young as a team, and especially we saw Connor Cox out on the field. We saw Casey Henderson get some action for a little bit, which was nice. Nick Harbor, but the reality of the situation is that they really haven't played that many games. They have not had the experience that Spencer Rattler or Xavier Legette or DQ Smith has. That was one of the things too I was going to mention is that DQ Smith's was the most energetic person on the field, like Shane said, and I think that's where the frustration is. Like he was anxious to get in there to try to fix the situation, and he contributed a little bit, I would say, but.
Yeah, something that you're gonna have to watch, I guess, down the stretch here is there are kind of 2 sections of this team now, right? Where you have some of the upperclassmen that will have opportunities to play in the NFL, and if you lose one more game and are out of bowl contention, then you might start to see them start to shift to whatever is next for them mentally, and then you do have these young guys that are going to presumably be back next year, like DQ Smith, like Jalen Kilgore, like most of the offensive line. So I do think that that's going to be something. I mean, right now you still have the bowl game ahead of you, whatever, there's still things to play for, but just maintaining those different mindsets and attitudes within the locker room is going to be a challenge for Shane and the staff, I think. And it gets that much harder when you feel like you have the fan base against you as well, which I feel like probably was the vibes down on the field at times. I don't fully blame frustrated fans at this point, especially it's just been so long in the desert, I guess. Like they at halftime they honored the best squads in South Carolina football history, that 3-year span where they won 11 games each under Spurrier. Spurrier himself was there. And then to see like the product on the field as it is now, with those stark reminders of what could have been, what once was, and what hopefully one day will be again. I think that was maybe a little bit too much to bear at the time.
And I think Gamecock fans need to understand is, although this is Shane Beamer's third year, his whole prerogative has been the future of the team. So his recruiting style is completely different. He's been going really hard on that, and we're young. So I don't think you should automatically not be a Gamecock fan, because there is still hope and excitement for more to come.
I think, and I wrote about this in the Rapid Reaction too, and we've talked about it a few times the past few weeks on the podcast. The most essential part of whether or not Shane Beamer ever reaches the heights that like he wants to, that I tend to think he probably can do, or that we've seen glimpses of through the first 3 years, is going to be how this season ends and the offseason goes. Like, can you hold on to this 2024 recruiting class that has 11 4-star or above athletes in it? Can you hold on to all of your young talent instead of them looking elsewhere and going somewhere in the transfer portal because they no longer buy in to the trajectory of the program? Can you use your salesmanship or whatever to go into the portal and fill gaps, which is something that they struggled with last season or last offseason? In my weekly recruiting wrap up that I wrote yesterday, I actually talked a lot about the positions that they might target in the portal. I think that they'll probably try to go after running back again. Probably going to have to fill some gaps with wide receiver. Speaking of wide receiver, we saw Nicholas Harbor kind of take a step back this week after Leggett kind of took his step back forward coming off of that injury. I think that's really all it is Spencer just feels so much more comfortable with Leggett at this point. But it was nice to see them target Nick Harbor on that opening throw of the second half where it was just like a deep shot to him. But something that Harbor's going to have to learn is how to use his big body to fight that ball. It was a little underthrown. It wasn't, I'm sure Rattler himself would say that wasn't his best pass ever. But it also still felt like an opportunity where a year or two from now, once Harbor has better sense of how to use his body to like box out a defender or something, that was a catchable ball. So but anyway, yeah, I think point being, I agree with you that they're young, but it's not going to matter if they stay perpetually young because they lose a bunch in the portal this year or whatever. So it's going to be essential to keep the idea that they're progressing in the right direction at least alive in that roster's mind as we head to the off season.
Yeah, Shane definitely needs to have the same focus as he does recruiting high schoolers as he does in the transfer portal, I think. And that was, like you said, something that we struggled with. We did pretty okay, but it wasn't any more people left from last season than
you brought in,
caliber wise, than what we got in return, I would say.
Yeah. But speaking of one of those guys that you got in return, Mario Anderson, I thought had another pretty solid game. He just runs hard and he's a gamer. Like he got injured a couple of different times. And I was like, man, he may be done. There was like a ankle injury he had, whatever, and then he just comes right back out there and tries to run over people again. We saw DJ Braswell get 1 carry. It was 1 carry for no yards, but kind of interesting to see him show up for just a second. Thanks, Hip Hop Madness. He says, "You're right. I hope he keeps the class together and finds some gems in the portal." Yeah, that's gonna be essential. So we talked about the game. We talked about some of these big plays. I want to talk about a moment that I'm calling "find some joy." Right? That's the classic saying that Shane Beamer said in year one, when similarly there was some disgruntled parts of the fan base that were having a hard time seeing the forest for the trees or whatever. So what from this game or from where we're at gives you hope at the moment, Pauline?
I think what gives me the most hope is I always talk about it. I just mentioned it, but the future of the team. But I want to see who's going to be coming out as a leader. And I think Tonka Hemingway was a great example of somebody who will become a great personality for the team, will be a great leader for the younger people coming on. And just, I guess, I would like to see the camaraderie again. And hopefully we will be able to get back to that, because there are players emerging as, main characters to look for and for other players to look to. That's what I guess.
Yeah, I think that there is hope in the young talent that has already contributed, and it's been rough at times to have to start 2 freshmen on the offensive line. But next year, those 2 sophomores, assuming that they're both back, that start on the offensive line will already have had this, struggle and have another year in the weight room and be in a better place than they would have been if they had just sat on the bench all year this year. So I do think having a young team means that you're going to lose more games than not. Means you have to figure out the winning mindset too, right? Like, I think no one would disagree that South Carolina was the more talented team on Saturday, but they were coming off a 4-game losing streak. They really haven't won any of the games that they've been in throughout the year this year. Other than, I guess, Mississippi State was one that they kind of had to struggle through a little bit. And yeah, it really is like something that you have to learn how to finish games, and plays like what Stone Blanton made at the end of that game is how you take advantage of your opportunities and finish games. Scoring 10 other points off of other turnovers is how you take advantage of your opportunities and win games. So I think this season is a potential like ground swelling season for the future, as long as they pick up that experience and start to learn some of those things. Any other things that you wanted to talk about with this game in particular? I think we both texted about this a little bit earlier, but one discouraging thing I think was just that South Carolina's offensive line had a little bit of a struggle getting much of a push in the run game, and their defensive line got pushed around at times, even though Jacksonville State's offensive line is presumably smaller and not as strong as an SEC defensive front. But there was one drive in particular, I think you said that the announcer called it big boy football that Jacksonville State like put on them. It was just discouraging. Go ahead. Sorry.
We just were not big boy football. That's all.
No, that's what I'm saying. And I think that was probably the most discouraging thing. It would be one thing if you just got like a ton of trick plays that had lucked their way to 28 points. But no, there were times in this game where Jacksonville State physically dominated you on defense. I mean, they put up, 225 rushing yards, and that was not a fluke. Between their quarterback, who also was gutting it out. I mean, eventually he got knocked out, but he got hurt 2 different times and came back in. Between their quarterback and their trio of running backs, they just like put it on you a couple of times.
And that's what I think I was trying to get to at the beginning of the podcast, was like out on the field, it almost looked like roles were reversed and how we were playing. And we looked like a team that just joined we looked like we just
FBS, yeah.
I want to say FBS, but I didn't want to get it wrong. But yeah, no, we looked like the team that just joined, as if we hadn't been in an SEC D1 conference for ever. I mean, it just wasn't like, it looked like they belonged to where we are right now. We don't deserve the spot.
Yeah, and to be fair, like, this is what Rich Rodriguez does. He's a seasoned veteran head coach, seasoned veteran play caller. His offense was revolutionary at the time that he first instituted it, and it's good at running the ball. So like this, they've done this to everyone else. There's a reason that they're 7-2. I do think you have to take a little bit of a step back and realize this wasn't a bad football team. It was a good football team that you beat. Still, I think as a SEC program in the third year of a head coach, you like to think that you are far enough along to be the more physically dominant team, and at times you just weren't on Saturday, and I think that that's a little scary for some folks. You have one more week to Hip Hop Madness says the same thing. Rich Rod got them right. I agree. They're a good team, and that sky's the limit for them going forward. They probably will have a chance to compete in the Conference USA. I believe that's their conference next year, or Sun Belt, whatever it is. Anyway, let's look a little bit ahead to Vanderbilt. So you have one more, I guess, like warm-up game. Now, granted, Vanderbilt could beat you, but if you look at their schedule, right, they aren't having the season that they want either. They got beat 31-15 by a kind of mediocre Auburn team on Saturday. Really, I mean, their best game thus far. They played Georgia sort of close for a half. They only lost to UNLV by 3. I mean, that's obviously not what you want. They played Wake Forest pretty close, but their only wins on the season are against Hawaii and Alabama A&M, and even that Hawaii game was pretty tight. So this is a game that I think, you are the better team. You're at home, and it's another opportunity to sort of like calibrate some things right before you finish the season with teams that are Kentucky, that I think is like probably pretty much on your level, and then Clemson, which is probably a little bit better than you at this point, but still a winnable game going forward. Do you have any thoughts on Vanderbilt coming up next week?
Slightly concerned, but that's just because of how we played this past weekend. That doesn't mean anything for this upcoming weekend. But to your point, everybody has to realize we do have one of the hardest schedules in the SEC and the NCAA
In the country.
Yeah,
no, totally.
So, knowing that and then comparing how Vanderbilt has been playing, y'all have to cut us some slack. And we will. I think we will show up to perform. We've had, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We've had we've been beaten, bruised, battered. So, I mean, your skin grows tougher. So hopefully coming into Vanderbilt, we will have a little bit more.
Yeah, it's definitely a must-win game. Hip Hop Man is still hanging out. Love it. He says we have to come out and jump all over Vandy. It can't be a game going into the fourth quarter. Yeah, I agree. This needs to be one that you get off to a better start, keep the crowd more engaged, and don't have those boo birds sort of raining down from the upper deck, which could very quickly happen if you fall behind to Vanderbilt again. So we'll have plenty of more coverage on that game throughout the week on GamecocksScoop.com. We'll start previewing it. Alan will be back from Paris on Wednesday, and we'll get the podcast preview for Vanderbilt together on Thursday. A couple other things just to kind of look around for. There's double basketball today if you're a South Carolina fan. So you got the women's game at 1 p.m. That is in Paris against Notre Dame. We'll have a live thread and full coverage on that here in a couple hours on GamecockScoop.com. Like I said, Alan is at Hale Georges Carpentier Arena. I don't know how to say it right, in Paris. And then the men's team also opens their season tonight against USC Upstate at home. And we will have a live reaction thread and some game coverage for that one again tonight as well. So yeah, if you're done with football season, like some people are, got some basketball coming around the corner. Any other final thoughts or anything?
Nope. Just for all y'all fans out there, just be patient. It might not be this season, but maybe next.
Yeah, find some joy, right? No, I fully understand both sides of it, but I also think if you are going to completely rinse your hands every 3 years, every time something turns wrong or whatever, you're just going to be perpetually in this cycle. So you might as well give the guy some time to build what he's trying to build. And it's easier to build what you're trying to build and easier to convince those recruits that this is the place to be when you have the fan base support, which I know is a little bit of a catch-22 because you don't want to support a losing team or whatever. But yeah, be a little bit more patient. We got a little bit more time, I think, before you need to start burning the whole thing down. All right. Until next time, this has been the GamecockScoop.com podcast. We'll see you.